this is Comic Time. I'm David.
And I'm Jet.
Today we're going to be talking about The Question by Denny O'Neil and drawn by Dennis Cowan. I wanted to start by talking about a little bit about the writer and artist of this. You may be familiar with Denny O'Neil. You have an omnibus mostly written by him. He did a lot of those Marvel DC stories in that omnibus that you own. Dennis Cowan, I don't know if you recognize that name, but he co-founded Milestone.
Oh, really?
Yes, with Dwayne McDuffie. So Milestone, of course, is the creator of the character Static. So I guess Dennis Cowan, a few years after the creation of this series, he would go on to found Milestone Publications, or Milestone Media, it's known as now. So how much do you know about The Question?
Very little. I think, and I could be totally wrong about this, I think The Question is inspired by a previously existing character called Mr. A, or something along those lines, that was kind of a talking head for a specific philosophy that I don't remember the name of, and then The Question...
Objectivism.
Oh, thank you, Objectivism. And then Mr. A becomes more sanitized when translated into The Question as a character. And then The Question later inspires Rorschach from Watchmen, who's Grocer.
They went ahead and probably did, a much darker version of The Question. Maybe it was closer to Mr. A. Yeah, that's right. So I was going to go back not that far with, that was Steve Ditko, who did Mr. A, and then Charlton asked him to kind of water down the character to make him more friendly for readers, and that's where you got The Question from. So Charlton Comics in the late 60s wanted a kind of side character to go with the Blue Beetle reboot that they were doing, and so those Blue Beetle comics lasted for between 67 and 1968, and The Question appeared sparsely here and there, and he had his own 3-issue mini-series, and then Charlton stopped publishing those characters for over a decade until in 1983, the characters were actually picked up by a company called Americomics, and they only owned him for that year, and they published one story with the characters in it called the name is eluding me. They published their own team that included The Question and Blue Beetle on it, and then DC swooped in and bought the rights to the Charlton Comics characters, which they then held on to until 1985. During the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths, they decided to start using those characters again, and so here we have The Question, created in 1987. This would be, of course, the first DC version of this character, or you could call him the post-crisis version. This is not an origin story. The first appearance he had post-crisis was actually in issue 5 to issue 7 of the 1986 Blue Beetle series. So if you wanted what he was doing before this, you'd have to read that. He was in Chicago hanging out with Blue Beetle for a year or so. And then in this story, he begins, and you can open that if you want to look at the first issue. So after coming back to Hub City, his hometown from Chicago, he's kind of just making a name for himself as a new vigilante. He's established that he can be a crime fighter. He has gone through his origin story sometime in the unknown past, where he did his first case where he investigated a scientist named Dr. Twain, who was creating this stuff called pseudoderm, and he was going to sell it to foreign countries even though pseudoderm was actually harmful to like skin, especially if it was put on like cuts and stuff, it could cause illness. The question was trying to stop Dr. Twain from selling this stuff. Funny enough, he had this former college professor named Aristotle that worked with the pseudoderm as well, and he gave him some to wear on like his face to make like a faceless mask so he could hide his identity while he went and confronted Dr. Twain about trying to sell this stuff, which I think is kind of an odd origin story. Hey, don't sell this pseudoderm stuff because it's harmful. Also, I'm wearing some on my face right now, but don't worry about that.
When you described that it was harmful, I almost thought it was going to be like a Harvey Dent Two-Face kind of thing, where he like tries to stop the guy and then it gets splashed on his face and it was like a permanent mask of pseudoderm or something.
No. The pseudoderm seems mostly harmless to Mr. Vic Sage himself. I guess because he doesn't have any cuts on his face or something, so it's fine with him. He uses a special gas to like seal it to his face and everything, so you wouldn't even be able to like rip it off or anything. You can't feel the edges of it.
Oh wow.
The gas also is adapted later on. By the time of this story, it also changes the color of his clothes and hair. So it's just like a quick change. Basically, puts the pseudoderm on his face, sprays himself with the gas, and now he looks completely different.
Can he pick what color he changes it to?
No, I think it makes it this blue suit.
Oh, it specifically is like I become the question, essentially.
I think it makes his suit blue, and it gives him this blonde hair.
Interesting.
So that's kind of how he transforms into the vigilante. He's still friends with that college professor that sent him on that first investigation, that Aristotle guy who he calls Tot.
Why Tot?
Tot is in the middle of
Aristotle.
The name Aristotle. I don't see. That's kind of a dumb nickname, but he doesn't complain. So when we jump into this story, he's back in Hub City. Hub City is supposed to be like the most corrupt, crime-ridden city in the DC's version of the United States.
So worse than Gotham
Yes.
or Bloodhaven?
Yes, if anything was worse than Gotham or Bloodhaven, it would be Hub City. So Vic Sage is a when he's not being a vigilante, he is a TV reporter, news reporter, and basically what he does is he will investigate corruption in the city, and then he will then go and report about it on the news. So when we start off, he seems to be investigating the mayor himself, and he comes to this hangout of these sort of just this group of thugs that are playing a game of cards or dice or whatever, but he's there for a videotape. And as he's entering here, you see on the first page there, see him outside the window, he's kind of monologuing to himself. And I think that's pretty typical for the question, but looking into the things that he says to himself and to others in this first issue, you'll notice I think he has some pretty blaring character flaws that he has to work on in the future if he wants to survive and be a good vigilante. He's very arrogant. He's very content with the violence that he dishes out, and he seems to even enjoy it. The very simple way to put it is he's in over his head. He doesn't really know what he's getting himself into. He just assumes that I can handle it. But anyway, he goes in, he busts in this building, and he very sloppily takes down these thugs and takes this videotape. There is an important woman there that was with these thugs who just kind of watches it all happen. And he tells her, hey, stay out of this. And she's like, yeah, I wasn't going to get in it anyway. He has no idea who this woman is, and that is going to be big issue for him in the future. He didn't know what he was getting himself into. So this videotape turns out to be a clip of the commissioner of schools like doing cocaine, and there's like a scantily clad woman there who he determines is this woman that lives with a successful landowner in town and land developer in town. And he said, so it just so happened that the commissioner of schools also granted this landowner recently a great deal on a plot of land in town. And he just happens to be hanging out with the girlfriend of this land developer. And he is also going to tie that corruption to the mayor, suggesting that I've been doing all this reporting on corruption like this that has made it clear that there's all sorts of deals and favors going around politically, and the mayor should know about it, because I know about it and I'm reporting on it, and the mayor doesn't seem to be doing anything or acknowledging it. So the mayor must be in on it too, and he's tying this videotape to the mayor, saying that the mayor had these thugs holding on to it, kind of to be used as blackmail in the future.
Why is it that people don't know he's the question if he steals the tape and then immediately as an
Reports on
investigator?
it.
Yeah.
So I thought that too while reading it, and the only thing we have mentioned is one of the thugs will go along to try and assassinate Vic Sage on the street, and he'll be like, "Why are you trying to shoot me?" And he's like, "Because this is getting you back, you and your buddy, the question, the man with the mask who busted us up the other day. I know you guys are working together," kind of thing.
So it's just assumed by people they're not the same guy.
That they're not the same guy, but they work together, I guess. Which, I mean, if you already have somebody going after Vic Sage to assassinate him, it almost seems like he doesn't need a secret identity in the first place.
Right.
It seems like he's already in as much danger as the question himself is, if they're already being associated with each other anyway, whether or not they're the same person. So after that, after he reports on, shows the videotape on the news, we will cut to, and it's actually the next page after that, I think. Yeah. So we will cut to this scene here where we have this
Not
woman.
Mary Jane Watson.
No. This is a woman. Does it name her there? I forget her name.
I'm looking around.
Myra.
Myra.
So
Myra's a bad.
this woman Myra is somebody else that works at the news station with him. They work together. She's very much aware of him being the question and what he does, and she basically is trying to warn him and be like, you're in a lot of danger here. What if they went after you? He just kind of says, "I'll handle it." In this conversation, he's being very cold and matter of fact in all his responses. He's just kind of like, "You don't know what you're talking about. I'm fine." And he's like, I guess he's just kind of like, "Yeah, I like the way things are." She mentions the bruises on his knuckles, and he's just kind of like, "You should see the other guys," So that's that's his personality at this point. He's putting himself in danger and seems like, I'll handle it, and if I don't, whatever,
He's a reporter, and I get that Tot sent him on that first case or whatever. Why is he so good at fighting people?
Why is he so good at fighting people? I don't know if his origin, being as basic as it is, I don't know if it gives us any, gives us much in terms of him being good at fighting people. As far as we can tell, he's a decent street brawler. He's not an amazing fighter or anything. And if you saw that first fight he got into, they got some licks in on him too. I don't know, he must have, spent some time in the gym doing some boxing and things like that. He's not a crazy martial artist or anything by this point, which you'll see by the end of this issue. And throughout this issue, we're getting this countdown, it'll say like 23 hours until the death of Vic Sage, or 22 hours until the death of Vic Sage. We keep getting...
Like the show 24.
Kind of, yeah. We keep getting reminded that, Vic Sage, or I guess in there it says Charles Victor Zsasz is going to die in however many hours. That's this story retcons that his original name is actually Charles Victor Zsasz, but he doesn't go by that name.
Of no relation to the Zsasz from Batman who marks himself?
Yeah. This is Charles Zsasz. Yeah, Charles Victor Zsasz, not the Victor Zsasz, a serial killer that is a Batman villain. So yeah, we do have two Victor Zsaszes, but he goes by Vic Sage by this point. So you can... what's weird about that is that's kind of an unnecessary retcon, because his original name was Vic Sage anyway, in like Charlton Comics. And he doesn't go by Victor Zsasz here, so I don't know why they added that in. But
maybe someone was trying to plant a seed for them to later connect him to the Batman guy, and maybe it just never happened.
That would be a weird connection. I don't think there really is any connection between Victor Zsasz and the Question.
They need to make that. I like the idea that Zsasz could, if he had the pseudoderm, cover up all those cuts or whatever, and then you wouldn't know it was him.
Maybe, yeah. Victor Zsasz might be somebody he would investigate, Although he seems to be more interested in like political corruption and stuff like that. So the next place he goes after leaving, after spending the night with this Myra girl, I think he goes and visits his old friend Tot. They just have like a little brief conversation about like philosophy and stuff, as the Question does. As he's a philosophical character, isn't he? Really, he just goes there to mention to Tot that the pseudoderm isn't working as it should be lately, like it hasn't been sealing to his face completely, and he determines that, it's because you started smoking again. I created this gas formula, with your like body chemistry in mind, and you've changed it now that you started smoking again, so it's probably affecting the way the gas affects the pseudoderm. So he tells him, stop smoking. It's like ever since you came back to Hub City, you've started smoking again, and you seem like a lot more violent than even before. You just seem like on edge. You seem worse than usual. And he probably just kind of brushes it off, saying like, I'm fine. I'll deal with it. But he says, all right, I'll try to cut back on the smokes, to see if that solves the issue. And that's kind of just, I think, an introduction to the character Tot, to kind of give you an idea of their relationship between one another, because Tot will reappear again in the future. It's kind of his mentor, I guess. And then after that, let's see. What happens after that?
Is this the assassin part?
Right. So he meets up with, he's walking down the street to meet up with a contact here, this homeless guy that he, I guess, often gets information from, and he's being, like, hassled by a cop, and he has to, like, tell the cop to, like, get out of here, leave the guy alone, which he's then pursued by a man with a gun who ends up shooting the cop accidentally while trying to hit Vic Sage. And so Vic Sage ends up chasing down the guy who's trying to kill him, because the guy like missed, hits the cop, and he's like, I gotta get out of here. Vic Sage catches up with him, and he's like, why are you after me? The guy says, this is actually, by the way, this is the guy who's trying to kill him is the guy that gave up the videotape to him when when the question was after that. After threatening all these guys, he ended up. This guy ended up caving and giving him the videotape. So he's like, "Man, I'm worried I'm going to get in trouble, so I'm going to like try to kill you, and maybe that'll like get me on their good side again." It doesn't work. Vic Sage like knocks the crap out of him, and he says like, you hurt you, I'm gonna hurt you.
This guy should have no reason not to believe that Vic Sage is the question. He's just wearing the same fit. I know you mentioned the spray
Right.
can change the clothes.
He's
color.
wearing that suit right now.
Yeah, and you mentioned that it can make his hair blonde. He's blonde right now, and he can see his face. He knows it's Vic Sage because he's calling him Vic Sage. How does he not go, "It's just you. You even hit me before."
You guys must have went to the same high school or something. Longtime buddies. You're in some kind of gang together.
Dress code.
But like I said, it almost doesn't matter because it seems like they're after Vic Sage just as much as they are the question. So despite the oddity that they don't just immediately track that Vic Sage is the question, he's in just as much danger. His secret identity is pretty much pointless anyway.
Are they going to go after Myra?
Not in this issue, that's for sure.
Sure.
They don't go after Myra, which is odd. Maybe if what happens at the end of this issue didn't end up happening and they had more trouble like getting to him, they might have gone for her at some point. Maybe maybe that's a new relationship and they don't really know that he's like dating her yet or anything. So after that little encounter, it cuts to the Reverend here, this priest who hangs out with the mayor. Whenever we see the mayor, we see the priest sitting like right next to him and kind of like pulling the strings. Really, it seems like the mayor is just a puppet for this Reverend, who is the one who's actually running Hub City and is probably the primary reason controlling all this corruption. And he does like a TV seminar here, and he just kind of explains like where he got his like newfound faith. He talks about being there, and he was there in Vietnam as like a chaplain, and he said after all the like death and despair that I saw, I realized I need to keep in mind that I'm only supposed to serve one master. And what we see here is not the same thing that I think he's telling the public.
The audience.
Yeah.
What's shown here looks almost like a soldier with a Bible, and he like throws his cross necklace.
He's denouncing his religion. So that makes me think that the Reverend is like a fake priest.
Right.
And this is what actually happened at the bottom here, but he's kind of speaking in general terms, so you don't quite know what he's talking about.
It also is weird for him to say he found his faith as a chaplain during the war. It sounds like if you're a chaplain, you already are like in the faith or whatever.
Is that the specific
It's like a weird
wording?
story. Oh, I'm looking at pictures. I'm listening to you. Weird context.
Well, no, I think he was. The newfound faith I'm talking about is the experience of seeing all the death and destruction. He was already a religious man, being a chaplain in the military. Yes, but I think he's trying to suggest that it was being in Vietnam that
Pushed him deeper.
pushed him further and doubled down on his faith. But actually, I think it did the opposite,
Right.
suggesting what that shows there. So that's just a brief scene there, and we move on to
I see that woman.
their woman again. Do you know who this woman is?
Off the top, like if I just were to guess, is it like Lady Shiva or something?
It is Lady Shiva.
Ooh.
Right. Lady Shiva is actually on the payroll, it seems, for the mayor and by association this Reverend. Vic Sage does not know who Lady Shiva is, and that's unfortunate for him because if he had recognized her there that night, I think he would have been a little bit more cautious than he has been. because Lady Shiva is meant to be one of the greatest martial artists in the world, even better than Batman. So it does. We find out this is Lady Shiva, who is this woman that didn't intervene in that first fight, but she will later on once they tell her like, hey, you know, you didn't do anything last time. Can you like do something this time? And she's like, okay, you know, you didn't pay me to stop him from taking the videotape last time, so. So anyway, the scene here is at a diner. We see that homeless guy that's an informant for Vic Sage is actually talking to one of the thugs that the Question beat up the other night. And it turns out that this homeless guy is kind of a two-timer here. He's clearly telling the thug that he's an informant for Vic Sage, and the thug is like, okay, well then here's what you can tell Sage, you know, tell Sage that we're gonna like be here at the docks tonight at this time, and he's like, okay, yeah, I'll tell him that. And so he's gonna pass that information on to the Question, and then of course we go over here. The Question is immediately like, yeah, that sounds like a trap, but I'm just gonna go over there anyway because I can handle it. You know, this is his character flaw coming in. He thinks, after hanging out with Blue Beetle in Chicago, he's like, man, I can do anything, man.
I'm in Hub City.
Yeah, I can just do whatever. You know, the Blue Beetle's a good friend of mine, man. Don't make me call him.
Batman can't even handle Hub City.
But, yeah, so the Question, after his recent experience in his life, I guess he thinks that he's some kind of big shot and thinks that he can just do anything. So he's not worried about this being a trap. I mean, he knows it is, but he doesn't care. So we move on to the next page here, and he heads there at the time tonight, almost as if it was a request. Basically, he's like, oh, you want me to go over there at the docks at 10 p.m.? Yeah, I'll be there. And he shows up, and he's a little bit cautious. He kind of like walks up, and you see him like hiding around the corner, like trying to like inspect what's going on. Doesn't matter. They know he's there. They know he was coming. Everybody knows what's going on. So he shows up as the Question. And Goofy
I love the way this is set up.
Yeah, the snow and
art,
everything.
yeah.
It is pretty nice, all dotted.
A lot of it is borderless panels, so it all kind of like bleeds together. And this action layout, where it's 9 grid, 3 rows of 3 panels.
Mm-hmm. That's the fight scene right there. Yeah.
Right. This is what Watchmen is famous for, the like 9 grid. But it's neat that it's a 9 grid, no text.
Yep.
All hands.
Just fight.
Yeah.
Yep. See, that's one thing you got to give credit to. Dennis Cowan did a really good job with the art in this. There's a lot of times I'm very like skeptical of art from you know many decades in the past. You know, the 80s, and when you go back to the Silver and Golden Age, I get kind of skeptical of how the art is going to be. But the art in this series is pretty good. Dennis Cowan was a good choice, and so he is now here confronting the thugs, and the Reverend is there, and thugs have a stupid ass line saying like, "Oh, it's not Vic Sage, it's the mask guy is here," you know. But so yeah, he walks up there. The immediately confrontation between Lady Shiva and Vic Sage. Vic Sage still has no idea who she is. She starts by saying, like, do you have a preferred method of combat? And he's like, lady, just, like, get out of here. You didn't fight me last time. You should stick with doing that. And she immediately just, like, grabs him by the arm and, like, you know, like, breaks the thing. And she's throwing him around. He's not getting any hits in.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. It's one-sided.
Yeah, she's completely dismantling him until he's basically knocked out on the ground. And then the Reverend tells the thugs to join in and like get their revenge for the beating they got earlier. And yeah, they basically just start like beating his head in with all sorts of like tools and crowbars and stuff until they get a guy to shoot him in the head. And it is notably it is a like little like cattle gun that you'd use to like kill your cattle, and so it's a smaller round than a 22 even, so it's a real like pebble-sized round almost. And so they shoot him in the head with that after like beating him up, and then toss him into the river. And that's just where that's where it ends. You get the end, and what does that last box say there?
As the husk of what had been Charles Victor Zaz settles into the sand and is cold and silent and still.
Right. And so kind of this was what the countdown for the whole first issue was building towards, that he presumably just dies at the beginning of or at the end of the first issue there, partly due to his character flaws, due to the fact that his just arrogance. He was in over his head, and he wasn't taking like any precautions. He wasn't thinking enough about what he was doing. But we could pick up a little bit on the first issue, because surely readers must know he's not actually going to like die and stay dead, because this is a 35 issue series. So picking up with like the first couple panels of the second issue there, just he will wake up kind of in an unknown place, and it seems like he's got amnesia, because the first person he sees will be Tot, but he seemed to have no memory of who Tot is or what happened. And what's going to happen over the next couple issues is he's going to go through a sort of character arc, as he's going to learn a lot about himself and learn a lot about being a better vigilante, because as you could see in this first issue, he had some things that he needed to improve on personally, because it almost got him killed. So that's the first issue of The Question, and I think it's a pretty good introduction to the character. When I read it for the first time, it was fine, but I think reading it the second time, I understood it a lot more, and I think I saw what they were doing with his character a lot more, with the character flaws and whatnot. Because when I was reading it the first time, I was thinking about like, oh man, he's kind of not a likable person, man. He's kind of a very arrogant, angry at the world. Didn't seem to think too much about his next action. He was just very aggressive about his actions. And I figure over the course of the Question series, he changes quite a bit. I know he gets in a lot into things like Buddhism a lot. He'll like get into like meditation and like inner peace to try and like calm the like negative aspects of his personality. What did you think so far?
I was surprised by that fight sequence in terms of like the art, as well as the very first panel with him like in the rain and the silhouette. I like the use of like darkness from like a visual point of view, using like more dark colors and shades. Try to get your sleeve on. There we go. I agree that he didn't sound like a likable person. Like as you were describing the comic, I'm like, oh, I feel like I wouldn't like hearing his inner monologue and seeing his character interactions, and it makes you wonder why the people around him even care about him, considering how he treats them. It's one thing for him to be fighting like gangsters and being like, oh, I don't like them, Hub City is such a bad place. And it's another thing for him to be talking to Myra or Tot and be so like callous.
The word I was thinking of earlier when I had that like long pause, I was thinking the word cold. I think cold is a really good way to describe his disposition when he's interacting with people in this first issue, and hopefully that's something that changes in his character. I think he was just too like dead set on being a vigilante and stopping these guys, and didn't bother to stop and think about how he was going about it. But yeah, that is The Question issue 1 by, let me see that there, Dennis O'Neil and Dennis Cowan. That is this cover of this omnibus. It just so happens to also be the cover of the first issue of the series. I have the individual issue somewhere back there in the corner. But I figured this is a lot more durable of a book to kind of just pass around. So that is that.
Awesome. What would you rate it out of 10? And we can put like an Amazon link in the description for people to pick it up if they want.
Out of 10, this is a solid 7 or 8. Just getting started. I think it's a really gripping ending for a first issue. You definitely, I think a lot of people who read this, if they were to just pick it up at a store, would want to see what happens next, because it'd be like, ooh, how do they continue this kind of thing? Yeah, it's a solid 7 out of 10, or give or take like a 4 out of 5, maybe, if you were rating it on a 5 scale.
Interesting. I'd probably rate it a little bit lower as
Ooh.
someone who didn't read it and heard it through like the story thing. The way it's set up, it sounds like if someone were to pick up issue 2, it probably will do a lot of carrying for you. Because even he doesn't remember what happened in issue 1. So assuredly, people are going to be like, don't you know the events of issue 1? And then so I almost feel like it sounds skippable now that I know that he's going to have amnesia in issue 2.
So I think the idea of the amnesia in issue 2 is going to be basically resetting his personality. I don't think it's so much for like being a starting point for the story, although it probably could have been, but I don't know if you would have gotten the like context from the first issue that it was establishing.
Right.
You wouldn't have known who he
growth.
was.
Right.
You wouldn't have seen who he was before the amnesia if you hadn't got this issue. I think he needed to fail here, if based on how they wanted to set things up. It's a nice like character growth sequence in the first few issues that we'll get, almost like Batman's training before he started being Batman. Except Batman made sure he did that before starting to be a vigilante, where the Question kind of failed to do that at the right time.
True.
But that's the Question, issue 1.
Thank you again for watching. I'm Jet.
And I'm David.
Welcome to Comic Time.